nobody expected this to happen. Not like this. Because what started as a shocking headline, Offset getting shot outside a luxury casino, has now turned into something way more dangerous, way more personal, and way more controversial than anyone saw coming. And trust me, the shooting itself, that might not even be the craziest part anymore. Because just hours after the incident, when people thought the story was already over, Lil Tjay walked out of jail, and what he did next completely flipped the entire narrative upside down. He didn't stay quiet, he didn't lay low, he didn't act like someone caught in a serious situation. Instead, he went straight to the internet and dropped a statement so explosive, it instantly divided the entire hip-hop world. He called Offset a rat. Yeah, you heard that right. A rat. And if you know anything about hip-hop culture, you already know that's not just an insult. That's a career-ending accusation. But here's where things get even crazier. Lil Tjay didn't just throw the word around. He described the moment. He claimed that right before everything went down, Offset looked directly at him, pointed, and basically told authorities, "That's the one." Now pause for a second, because if that's even partially true, then this isn't just a shooting story anymore. This becomes something much bigger, something way more dangerous, something that could completely change how people see Offset forever. Because now the question isn't just, who shot him? The question is, what did Offset do after he got shot? And whether you believe Lil Tjay or not, one thing is clear, and the internet has already chosen sides. Some are saying Offset did what any victim would do. Others are saying he crossed a line you never cross. And now, what people are calling revenge might not be what you think at all. Because this isn't about guns anymore. This is about reputation, respect, and a move that could either protect Offset or completely destroy his image in the culture. But trust me, what really happened that night, and what came after, it's way more complicated than anyone is telling you, and the truth might actually shock you. To understand how this situation got this messy, you have to go back before the gunshot, before the arrest, before the word rat started trending all over social media. Because this didn't start in a casino parking lot. This didn't start with one argument, and it definitely didn't start overnight. This story, I had been building for months. Slowly, quietly, and then publicly. At the center of it all is Offset, a name that carries weight, legacy, and a reputation built over years in the industry. 1/3 of a group that dominated charts, headlines, and culture itself. A man who had already survived controversies, public drama, and personal losses that would break most people. But behind that image, cracks had already started forming, because while the world still saw success, there were whispers of something else. Pressure, stress, and more importantly, money issues. Now here's where things get uncomfortable, because according to multiple online claims and viral streams, those whispers turned into something very public when Lil Tjay stepped into the picture. At first, it didn't look serious, just another rapper talking, just another live stream moment. But then, the tone shifted. Lil Tjay didn't just mention Offset, he exposed him on a live stream in front of thousands of people. And what he said? It hit hard. He claimed that Offset, the same Offset people saw as untouchable, was actually struggling inside a casino, asking people for money, trying to keep gambling. Now think about that for a second. A global rap star, running around a casino floor, allegedly asking for cash. It didn't sound believable. But the way Tjay told it, the details made it feel real. Haha, too real. He talked about giving Offset money. Not once, but multiple times. First a few thousand, then more. And according to him, he never got it back. Now, whether that story is true or not, didn't matter because once it hit the internet, The damage was done. Because in hip-hop, respect is everything. And being called broke publicly, that's not just embarrassing, that's dangerous. And Tjay didn't stop there. He kept going, posting online, throwing subtle and not so subtle end shots, flexing jewelry, making comments that clearly targeted Offset without even needing to say his name every time. And every post, every comment, every clip, it added fuel to the fire. Now here's where things started getting personal, because Offset didn't just ignore it. He responded, but not in the way people expected. Instead of denying everything, instead of clearing his name, he challenged Lil Tjay directly, told him to meet face to face, even suggested going live together. And that right there, that changed the energy completely, because now this wasn't just online talk anymore. This was real. Two rappers and two egos, two reputations on the line, and neither one backing down. But here's the detail that made everything worse. Offset never clearly denied the debt. He never came out and said, "That never happened." Instead, he attacked Tjay's credibility, his career, his image, and for fans watching, that felt like confirmation. Or at least, it felt suspicious. And that's when people really started paying attention. Because now the story wasn't just about money, it was about humiliation, about a younger artist publicly calling out a bigger name. And not backing down, and in situations like that, things don't just fade away, they escalate. And escalate. And escalate. Until something finally breaks. Now fast forward a little, and you start seeing signs that this wasn't cooling down at all. Tjay kept bringing it up. Offset kept responding in his own way. And the tension? It didn't go away, it just went quiet. Which, honestly, is even more dangerous. Because when things go quiet like that, it usually means something is building behind the scenes. Something bigger. Something nobody sees coming. And then, it happened. The place where all of this started, a casino. The place where the alleged debt happened, a casino. And the place where everything finally exploded, the same kind of setting, a casino valet area. Now think about that coincidence. Out of all places, out of all possible locations, it comes back to that, and suddenly, everything feels connected. Everything feels intentional. Everything feels like it was leading to this exact moment. Because when Offset and Lil Tjay crossed paths again that night, this wasn't random. Yet this wasn't strangers arguing. This was history, tension, ego, disrespect, all colliding in one place at the same time. And once that confrontation started, there was no stopping it, no calming it down, no walking away. Because both sides had too much on the line. Too much pride. Too much pressure. And that's exactly how situations like this spiral out of control. Not in seconds, but in moments that have been building for months. Until one night, one argument, one wrong move, changes everything. When that moment came, it didn't just end in a fight, it ended in a gunshot. And what happened next, nobody was ready for. That night, everything finally exploded. Not online, not in comments, not in interviews, in real life. Because when Offset and Lil Tjay ended up in the same place at the same time, it wasn't just coincidence anymore. It felt like a collision that had been building for months. The setting? A casino valet area in Florida. Bright lights, expensive cars, people coming and going like it was just another normal night. But underneath that normal atmosphere, tension was already there. And the moment they saw each other, everything changed. Witnesses say it didn't start with violence. It started with words. Sharp, direct, personal. The kind of words that don't just come from nowhere, the kind that come from months of frustration, disrespect, and unresolved issues. You could almost feel it building. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about pride, about embarrassment, about everything that had been said publicly, now being brought face to face. And once it got to that point, there was no going back. The argument escalated fast. Voices got louder. People started gathering around. Phones came out. Because when two big names start clashing like that, everyone knows something is about to happen. And then, it turned physical. A shove, a swing, chaos, security trying to step in, people backing away, and in the middle of all of it, two rappers who had been going at each other for months, now right in front of each other with nothing holding them back. For a second, it looked like just another fight. Messy, public, but controllable. Until it wasn't. Because out of nowhere, a gunshot rang out. Everything froze. Then exploded, screaming, running, confusion. Nobody knew where it came from. Nobody knew who did it. All they knew was Offset had been hit. And just like that, the entire situation went from a heated argument to something way more serious, way more dangerous. Within minutes, emergency response showed up. Police locked down the area, people were pushed back, and Offset was rushed away for medical attention. Alive, but injured. And while all of this was happening in real life, the internet was already going crazy because videos started surfacing almost instantly. Clips of the fight, clips of the moments before the shot, people analyzing every frame, trying to figure out what actually happened. And that's when the first narrative formed. Because in those clips, fans believed they recognized someone, and the name that spread like wildfire? Lil Tjay. Within minutes, the story became Lil Tjay shot Offset. Beef turned violent. Casino fight ends in shooting. It made sense, at least on the surface. They had history, they had tension. They were just seen fighting. So naturally, people connected the dots. But here's where everything takes the first major twist. Because when official reports started coming out, they didn't match the internet's version at all. Yes, Lil Tjay had been detained. Yes, he was involved in the altercation. But when the charges were revealed, everything changed. No attempted murder, no firearm charges, no shooting-related accusations. Just disorderly conduct, a misdemeanor, that's it. Now think about that. The man everyone was accusing of pulling the trigger wasn't even charged for it. And just like that, the entire story collapsed. Because if Lil Tjay didn't shoot him, then who did? And more importantly, why? This is where the situation goes from chaotic to completely confusing, because now there were more questions than answers, and another person had been detained, but not charged. Police confirmed the investigation was still ongoing, meaning they didn't have the full story yet, and neither did the public. But the internet? It wasn't waiting, because before anyone could process the new information, another twist hit. And this one? It didn't just shake the story, it completely flipped it. Because after being released, Lil Tjay didn't go quiet. He didn't disappear. He didn't act like someone trying to stay out of trouble. Instead, he came out swinging, hard. He went public. And what he said, it instantly reignited everything. He called Offset a rat, not just once, not as a joke, but seriously, publicly. And then he went even further. He described the moment, said that the last thing he saw before everything went down was Offset looking at him and pointing. Pointing him out to police. Allegedly telling them, that's the one. Now pause right there, because this is where everything changes. Because in hip-hop culture, that accusation, it's bigger than the shooting itself. Way bigger. Because getting shot, that's physical. But being labeled a snitch, that's permanent. That's reputation ending. That follows you forever. And now, that label was being attached to Offset. And just like that, the entire narrative flipped again. Now the question wasn't just who shot Offset. It became, did Offset snitch after getting shot? And the reactions, explosive. Because some people said, he's the victim. What was he supposed to do? while others said there are rules and he broke them. And just like that, the story wasn't about the shooting anymore. It was about what happened after, about whether Offset's actions were justified or whether they crossed a line you're never supposed to cross, and right in the middle of all this chaos. Offset himself? Silent, no statement, no response, nothing, leaving the internet to decide his story for him. But trust me, what came out next didn't just add more drama. It took this situation to a level nobody expected, and just when it felt like the situation couldn't get any more chaotic, it completely spiraled out of control. Because the moment Lil Tjay stepped out and called Offset a rat, the internet didn't just react, it exploded. We're talking millions of views within hours, clips spreading across every platform, people replaying the moment again and again, breaking down every word, every gesture, every detail. Because this wasn't just gossip anymore. This was a full-blown culture moment. And if you understand hip-hop at all, you already know why this hit so hard. Because being accused of snitching, that's not something you can just ignore. That's not something that fades away. That's something that sticks forever. And Lil Tjay knew exactly what he was doing, because he didn't just drop the accusation and disappear. He doubled down. He described the scene in detail, said that in the chaos of everything happening, right after the shooting, right when police were arriving, Offset looked directly at him and pointed him out. Now, whether that's 100% accurate or not, didn't matter anymore. Because once that idea hit the internet, it became reality for a lot of people. And just like that, the narrative shifted again from Offset got shot to Offset snitched after getting shot. And that shift, it was brutal, because now people weren't just talking about the incident, they were judging it, debating it, arguing over it, and picking sides. But here's where things get even more intense. Because while this snitch narrative was spreading like wildfire, another question started creeping in. One that made everything even more complicated. If Lil Tjay wasn't charged with the shooting, then why would Offset point at him? Why not point at the actual shooter? Why not stay silent? Why not wait? That confusion, that gap in the story, it made people start questioning everything. Because now there were multiple possibilities. Maybe Offset was confused in the moment. Maybe he reacted instinctively. Maybe he genuinely believed Tjay was involved. Or maybe there's something we still don't know. And that uncertainty? It's what kept the story alive. Because every theory opened the door to another one. Some people believed Offset did what any victim would do. You get shot, you tell police who was there. Simple, logical. But others? They saw it differently. They said, no matter what, you don't do that. And just like that, the internet split into two completely different sides. One defending Offset, one turning on him. And the arguments? Non-stop. Comment sections turning into battlegrounds. Fans going back and forth, bringing up old interviews, old lyrics, old situations. Trying to prove their point. Trying to win the narrative. Meanwhile, the media started feeding into it. Headlines getting more aggressive, more dramatic, more suggestive. Offset accused of snitching after shooting. Lil Tjay breaks silence and exposes what really happened. Did Offset cross the line? Every new headline added more fuel, more attention, more pressure. And still, no response from Offset himself. And that silence, it made everything worse. Because now people weren't just reacting to what was said. They were reacting to what wasn't said. And in situations like this, silence can feel like confirmation, even if it's not. Meanwhile, other voices in the industry started creeping in. Subtle reactions. A like here, a repost there, a vague comment that didn't mention names, but clearly referenced the situation. And fans noticed everything. Because when big names stay quiet publicly, but react quietly, it says more than words ever could. Then came one of the most emotional moments in all of this. Was when Quavo posted that single emoji. Just prayer hands. Nothing else. But for fans, that hit different. Because it wasn't just about Offset getting shot anymore. It was about everything the group had already been through. The loss, the trauma, the history. And suddenly, this situation felt heavier, more serious, more real. Because people weren't just watching drama unfold. They were watching patterns repeat. And nobody wanted to see that happen again. But just when it felt like things couldn't get any more layered, another detail started gaining attention. And this one? It didn't involve the shooting directly. It involved what happened after. Because according to multiple reports and fan speculation, there may be more footage, more angles, more clips that haven't been released yet. And that idea, that possibility, it kept people hooked. Refreshing timelines, watching for updates, waiting for something new to drop. Because at this point, nobody felt like they had the full story. Not the fans, not the media, not even the people involved, at least not publicly. And that's what made everything feel so unstable, so unpredictable, so unfinished. Because when a story has this many gaps, this many unanswered questions, it doesn't end, it evolves. And right now, this situation is still evolving, still changing, still building towards something bigger. Because one thing is clear, the shooting was just the beginning. The arrest was just the first twist. The snitch accusation? That was the explosion, but what comes next might be the part that changes everything. At this point, the story wasn't just viral, it was unavoidable. Everywhere you looked, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, on Twitter, the same debate was happening over and over again. Not just about the shooting, but about what came after. Because the moment Lil Tjay called Offset a rat, the conversation changed completely. And the reactions? They were ruthless. Because now the internet wasn't just asking what happened. They were judging it. Hard. On one side, you had people defending Offset, and they were loud about it. Y'all are crazy. The man got shot. He's the victim. What was he supposed to do? If someone shoots you, you're supposed to protect them? Those posts started trending fast because for a lot of people, this wasn't complicated. It was simple. A man got shot. Police showed up. He reacted. End of story. And honestly, that side of the argument made sense. But then, there was the other side, and they weren't holding back either. Because for them, this wasn't about logic. It was about code. And in their eyes, that code had been broken. Doesn't matter what happened. You don't do that. Street rules don't change just because you got hurt. He just ended his own respect in the culture. Those comments, they hit just as hard. Because in hip-hop, reputation isn't just important, it's everything. And being labeled a snitch? That's not something you recover from easily. And just like that, the internet split in half. One side saying Offset did what any normal person would do. The other saying he crossed a line you never cross. And the arguments? Non-stop. Comment sections turning into full-blown debates. People bringing up old interviews, past lyrics, previous situations. Trying to prove whether Offset had ever stood on certain principles before. Not because now, everything he had ever said was being questioned. Meanwhile, now Lil Tjay was still out here talking, still pushing the narrative, still making sure people didn't forget what he said. And every time he repeated it, every time he doubled down, it kept the controversy alive. Because whether people believed him or not, they were still listening, they were still watching. And that's all it took to keep the fire burning. At the same time, the industry itself started reacting, but not in loud, obvious ways, in subtle ways, calculated ways. Because nobody wanted to fully step into the middle of this, but they couldn't ignore it either. That's when Quavo made his move. Just one post, just one emoji. And somehow, that said everything, because fans immediately flooded the comments. Talking about loyalty, talking about history, talking about everything the group had already been through. Because for a lot of people, this wasn't just another rap beef. This was deeper. This was emotional. This was a reminder of everything that had already been lost. And nobody wanted to see that cycle repeat again. But then, as if things weren't chaotic enough, another figure entered the conversation, and he didn't come quietly. 6ix9ine. Now, if you know anything about him, you already know what that means. Because the moment he started posting, the situation went from serious to completely unpredictable. He began trolling both sides, making comments, posting content, turning the situation into something even bigger. And for some people, that crossed a line, because now, a real-life situation involving violence was being turned into entertainment, into content, into something people could laugh at. And that made everything feel even more uncomfortable. Because at the center of all this, a man had been shot, a real situation, with real consequences. But online, it had turned into a spectacle. Memes, debates, hot takes, everyone trying to get their opinion heard. Everyone trying to go viral. And in the middle of all that noise, the truth? Still unclear. Because here's what makes this situation so crazy. Even after all the clips, all the reactions, all the arguments, nobody actually knows what fully happened that night. The investigation is still ongoing. The shooter hasn't been clearly identified, and the only people who truly know what went down, they're not talking, not publicly. And that silence? It keeps everything alive, because when there are no clear answers, there are endless theories. And right now, everyone has one. Some people believe Offset is completely innocent in every aspect of this. Some believe he made a move that could cost him his reputation. And some, they think there's still a bigger twist coming. Something nobody has seen yet. Something that could flip the entire story again. And honestly, at this point, nothing would be surprising anymore, because this situation has already gone further than anyone expected. From a casino fight, to a shooting, to an arrest, to a snitch accusation, to a full-blown culture debate. And somehow, it still doesn't feel finished. Because the moment something new drops, the moment someone breaks their silence, the moment new footage comes out, everything could change again. And if that happens, the reactions we're seeing right now might just be the beginning, on just when it felt like the internet had already said everything, analyzed everything, debated everything. One final detail started creeping into the conversation. And this one? It didn't just add to the story, it completely flipped it. Because beneath all the noise, all the arguments, all the viral accusations, there was one uncomfortable truth people kept ignoring. And once it started spreading, everything changed. See, up until now, the entire narrative was built on two big ideas. Lil Tjay was responsible for the shooting. Offset got revenge by pointing him out. But what if neither of those things are actually what happened? Because when you strip away the speculation, the viral clips, the online theories, the confirmed details tell a very different story. Lil Tjay? He was arrested. Yes, but not for shooting. No gun charge. On no attempted murder. Nothing tying him directly to pulling the trigger. Just a disorderly conduct charge. A fight. That's it. Now think about how big that is. The entire internet spent hours, even days, blaming him for something he hasn't even been officially charged with. And yet, that narrative is still being pushed, still being believed, still being debated. Which brings us to the second part, the revenge. Because when people hear that word, they imagine something violent, something physical, something immediate. But what if the real revenge wasn't a bullet? It was something else entirely. Something quieter, but way more damaging. Because if Lil Tjay's claim is true, if Offset really did point him out to police in that moment, then the revenge wasn't about hurting him physically. It was about something much deeper. Reputation, image, standing in the culture. Because in hip-hop, being labeled a rat can hit harder than anything else. It doesn't matter what actually happened. It doesn't matter who was right or wrong. Once that label sticks, it follows you everywhere. And now, that label is being attached to Offset. But here's the twist that nobody wants to fully admit. What if Offset didn't do anything wrong at all? What if, in that moment, after being shot, after the chaos, and after everything went down, he simply reacted like any human would? Think about it. You're injured. You're surrounded by confusion. Police are asking questions. Adrenaline is high. You're trying to process what just happened. In that situation, are you really thinking about codes and rules? Or are you just trying to survive? And that's where this story gets uncomfortable. Because it forces people to choose between two completely different realities. Reality 1. Offset is a victim who reacted naturally in a life-threatening situation. Reality 2. Offset crossed a line that, in certain circles, you're never supposed to cross. And both sides feel strongly about it. Which means there is no clear answer, no simple conclusion, no clean ending. Because even now, the biggest question still hasn't been answered. Who actually pulled the trigger? And until that question gets answered, everything else? It's just noise. Because right now, we have a shooting with no confirmed shooter. We have an accusation with no confirmation. And we have a narrative that's being shaped entirely by the internet. And if there's one thing we know about the internet, it doesn't wait for facts. It creates its own. Which means this story, it's still evolving, still changing, still unfinished. Because the moment new footage drops and the moment police release more information, the moment either Offset or Lil Tjay breaks their silence, everything could flip again. And when it does, the version of the story you believe right now might not matter anymore. So before you pick a side, before you decide what really happened, ask yourself this. Are you reacting to facts or to a narrative that hasn't been fully proven yet? Because something tells me this situation isn't over, not even close. And the next update? Yeah, it might change everything. Now it's your turn. Because after everything we just broke down, the shooting, the arrest, the accusations, the snitch claims, the silence, the confusion, one thing is clear. This story is still wide open. And honestly, it all comes down to what you believe. So let me ask you straight up, what really happened that night? Do you think Offset did what any normal person would do after getting shot? Or do you think he crossed a line that could follow him for the rest of his career? And what about Lil Tjay? Do you believe his version of events, or do you think he's flipping the narrative to protect himself? Because right now, the internet is completely split. And I want to know which side you're on. Drop your answer in the comments. A. Offset is the victim. He did nothing wrong. Offset crossed a line, and it's going to cost him C. We still don't know the full truth. Something bigger is coming, and don't just pick one. Explain why. Because the craziest theories, they usually end up becoming the next video. Also, if you made it this far, you already know this situation is not over. The investigation is still ongoing. New footage could drop at any moment, and the second either side speaks out, this entire story could flip again. So make sure you do this right now. Like the video if you think there's more to this than we're being told. Subscribe if you want the real breakdowns the second they drop, and turn on notifications. Because the next update, it might expose who really pulled the trigger. Stay locked in. Because this story, yeah, it's just getting started.